Hello. I'm gonna be totally honest with you. I have not done any of the research that I'm meant to do on this book. So we're walking in blind together. Yeah. We're gonna see how that one works out. So I think yesterday we decided on the song, oh boy, the Song of the Lark. But if we hit anything problematic that we don't really want to discuss, we can always not. So let's try it. Let's see how it goes. I don't know how many chapters it has. It looks like it's nice and oh boy, oh dear, oh, oh, it's a little longer than I thought it would be. Oh, there's an epilogue. Good golly, Miss Molly. It's this long, but that's about as long as the rest of our books. From page 139 to page 463. Who can do math? Never me. Patricia. Hold on. Let's see what she has to say. Is she here? My video is unavailable. All right, we're gonna try and get Patricia in here for a second. Bold of me to assume I know how to do that. There we go. I found the button. There's a little link. Okay. I'll be right back. Oh yeah, we're going real slow. Okay, cool. My computer has been going at a snail's pace today. Oh, she's here. Okay, we're good. Delicious. Okay, how do I get rid of this? She's in. There we go. Okay, cool. I was just telling our other friend, where they may be, that I've done no research on this book as I wanted to. It's a hefty boy. It's like, I was doing math. That's why I opened. Aha, there you are. 130. We in. That's so strange. Shiv also got the same notification. How odd. How very, very odd. Okay, it's a 324 page long book. Let's see, how long was Frankenstein? Where did I throw him? into what realm did I launch Frankenstein? Frankenstein was only like, what, 300 pages? The text is smaller, I think. Interesting. Okay, well, it's true, my computer has been moving at a snail's pace today. So let's do our how to be an anti-racist quotes, and then let's get on the way. Get along, little doggies. Okay. Okay, this is a quote about hip hop, which is like a genre that I've been taught to ignore. And this is mostly some thoughts that Ibram X. Kendi has on that. Hip hop has had the most sophisticated vocabulary of any American musical genre. I read endlessly its poetic text. But parents and grandparents did not see us listening to and memorizing gripping works of oral poetry and urban reporting, and short stories and autobiographies and sexual boasting and adventure fantasies. They saw, and still see, words that would lead my mind into deviance. And that was specifically a Black man's perspective on that. So I can't exactly speak to that same concept within white environments, but it rung true, I guess. It just, it was a really cool quote. I liked it a lot. That's my words. Okay, so let's get started on the Song of the Lark. There's a quote from Lenoir's Don Juan. John. So sorry. Don Juan. I got it. Where's that half Mexican part of me? Where'd she go? Okay. It was a wondrous, lovely storm that drove me. And that's the quote after I really bungled it. To Isabel McClung. What a name. On the uplands at morning, the world was young, the winds were free, a garden fair in that blue desert air. Its guest invited me to be. Song of the Lark, Part 1. Friends of Childhood. Chapter 1. Dr. Howard Archie had just come up from a game of pool with the clothier and 2 traveling men who happened to be staying overnight in Moonstone. His offices were in Duke Block, over the drugstore. Larry, the doctor's man, had lit the overhead light in the waiting room and the double student's lamp on the desk in the study. The isinglass sides of the hard coal burner were aglow, and the air in the study was so hot that as he came in, the doctor opened the door to his little operating room, where there was no stove. The waiting room was carpeted and stiffly furnished, something like a country parlor. The study had worn, unpainted floors, but there was a look of winter comfort about it. The doctor's flat-topped desk was large and well-made. The papers were in orderly piles under glass weights. Behind the stove, a wide bookcase with double glass doors reached from the floor to the ceiling. It was filled with medical books of every thickness and color. On the top shelf stood a long row of 30 or 40 volumes, bound all alike in dark mottled board covers with imitation leather backs. As the doctor in New England villages was proverbially old, so the doctor in small Colorado towns were 25 years ago. Okay, let me try this one again. As the doctor in New England villages is proverbially old, so the doctor in small Colorado towns 25 years ago was generally young. Dr. Archie was barely 30. He was tall, with massive shoulders, which he held stiffly, and a large, well-shaped head. He sounds like my type, I will not lie to you. We've got to go. Sophie's signing off. Okay, what a way to start. I'm just going to do the rest with a little thing over my, okay. I gotta go. He was a distinguished-looking man, for that part of the world at least. There was something individual in the way in which his reddish-brown hair parted cleanly at the side, brushed over his high forehead. His nose was straight and thick, and his eyes were intelligent. He wore a curly reddish mustache, and an imperial cut trimly, which made him look a little like the pictures of Napoleon III. His hands were what a way to describe a lad. His hands were large and well kept, but ruggedly formed, and the backs were shaded with crinkly reddish hair. He wore a blue suit of woolly, wide-walled serge. The traveling men had known at glance that it was made by a Denver tailor. The doctor was always well dressed. Dr. Archie turned up the student's lamp and sat down in the swivel chair before his desk. He sat uneasily, beating a tattoo on his knees with his fingers, and looked about him as if he were bored. He glanced at his watch, then absently took from his pocket a bunch of small keys, selected one and looked at it. A contemptuous smile, barely perceptible, played on his lips, but his eyes remained meditative. Yep, no. Behind the door that led into the hall, under his buffalo skin driving coat, was a locked cupboard. This the doctor opened mechanically, kicking aside a pile of muddy overshoes. Inside, on the shelves, were whiskey glasses and decanters, lemons, sugars, and bitters. Hearing a step in the empty, echoing hall without, the doctor closed the cupboard again, snapping the Yale lock. The door of the waiting room opened, a man entered, and came on into the consulting room. "Good evening, Mr. Kronberg," said the doctor carelessly. "Sit down." His visitor was a tall, loosely built man with a thin brown beard streaked with gray. He wore a frock coat and a broad-brimmed black hat, a white lawn necktie, and steel-rimmed spectacles. Altogether, there was a pretentious and important air about him, as he lifted the skirts of his coat and sat down. Good evening, Doctor. Can you step with me? I think Mrs. Kronberg will need you this evening." This was said with profound gravity and, curiously enough, with a slight embarrassment. "Any hurry?" the doctor asked, over his shoulder as he went into his operating room. Mr. Kronberg coughed behind his hand and contracted his brows. His face threatened at every moment to break into a smile of foolish excitement. He controlled it only by calling upon his habitual pulpit manner. "Well, I think it would be as well to go immediately. Mrs. Kronberg will be more comfortable if you are there. Been suffering for some time." The doctor came back and threw a black bag upon his desk. He wrote some instructions for his man on a prescription pad and then drew on his overcoat. "All ready," he announced, putting out his lamp. Mr. Kronberg rose, and they tramped through the empty hall down the stairway to the street. The drugstore below was dark, and the saloon next door was just closing. Every other light on Main Street was out. On either side of the road, and at the outer edge of the board sidewalk, the snow had been shoveled into breastworks. The town looked small and black, flattened down in the snow, muffled and all but extinguished. Overhead, the stars shone gloriously. It was impossible not to notice them. The air was so clear that the white sand hills to the east of Moonstone gleamed softly. Following the Reverend Mr. Kronberg along the narrow walk past the little dark sleeping houses, the doctor looked up at the flashing night and whistled softly. It did seem that people were stupider than they need be. As if on a night like this there ought to be something better to do than sleep 9 hours, or to assist Mrs. Kronborg, in functions which she could have performed so admirably unaided. He wished he had gone down to Denver to hear Faye Templeton sing Seesaw. Then he remembered that he had a personal interest in this family, after all. They turned into another street and saw before them lighted windows, a low story and a half house with a wing built on at the right and a kitchen addition at the back, everything a little on the slant, roofs, windows, and doors. As they approached the gate, Peter Kronberg's pace grew brisker. His nervous ministerial cough annoyed the doctor. Exactly as if he were going to give out a text, he thought. He drew off his glove and felt in his vest pocket. "Have a troche, Kronberg," he said, producing some. "Sent me for samples. Very good for a rut." "Ah, thank you. I was in something of a hurry. I neglected to put on my overshoes. Here we are, doctor." Kronberg opened his front door, seemed delighted to be at home again. The front hall was dark and cold. The hat rack was hung with an astonishing number of children's hats and caps and cloaks. They were even piled on the table beneath the hat rack. Under the table was a heap of rubbers and overshoes. While the doctor hung up his coat and hat, Peter Kronborg opened the door into the living room. A glare of light greeted them, and a rush of hot, stale air, smelling of warming flannels. At 3 o'clock in the morning, Dr. Archie was in the parlor putting on his cuffs and coat. There was no spare bedroom in that house. Peter Kronberg's 7th child, good Lord, a boy, was being soothed and cosseted by his aunt, Mrs. Kronberg. Mrs. Kronberg was asleep, and the doctor was going home. But he wanted first to speak to Kronberg, who, coatless and fluttery, was pouring coal into the kitchen stove. As the doctor crossed the living room, he paused and listened. From one of the wing rooms off to the left, he heard rapid, distressed breathing. He went to the kitchen door. "One of the children sick in there?" he asked, nodding toward the partition. Kronberg hung up the stove lifter and dusted his fingers. "It must be Thea. I meant to ask you to look after her. She had a croupy cold, but in my excitement, Mrs. Kronberg is doing fine, doctor? Not many of your patients with such a constitution, I expect." "Oh, yes, she's a fine mother." The doctor took up the lamp from the kitchen table and unceremoniously went into the wing room. 2 chubby little boys were asleep in a double bed, with the coverlids over their noses and their feet drawn up. In a single bed next to theirs lay a little girl of 11, wide awake, 2 yellow braids sticking up on the pillow behind her. Her face was scarlet, and her eyes were blazing. The doctor shut the door behind them. "Feel pretty sick, Thea?" he asked as he took out his thermometer. "Why didn't you call somebody?" She looked at him with greedy affection. "I thought you were here," she spoke between quick breaths. "There's a new baby, isn't there? Which?" "Which?" repeated the doctor. "Brother or sister?" He smiled and sat down on the edge of the bed. "Brother," he said, taking her hand. "Open?" "Oh boy." "Good. Brothers are better," she murmured as she put the glass tube under her tongue. "No, Queen. Don't fall victim to the patriarchy so young, Queen." "Now, be still. I want to count." Dr. Archie reached for her hand and took out his watch. When he put her hand back under the quilt, he went over to one of the windows. They were both tight shut, and lifted it a little way. He reached up and ran his hand along the cold, unpapered wall. "Keep under the covers. I'll come back to you in a moment," he said, bending over the glass lamp with his thermometer. He winked at her from the door before he shut it. Peter Kronberg was sitting in his wife's room holding the bundle which contained his son. His air of cheerful importance, his beard and glasses, even his shirt sleeves, annoyed the doctor. He beckoned Kronborg into the living room and said sternly, "You've got a very sick child in there. Why didn't you call me before? It's pneumonia, and she must have been sick for several days. Put the baby down somewhere, please, and help me make up the bed lounge here in the parlor. She's got to be in a warm room, and she's got to be quiet. You must keep the other children out. Here, this thing opens up, I see." Swinging back the top of the carpet lounge. "We can lift her mattress and carry her in just as she is. I don't want to disturb her more than is necessary." Kronberg was all concern immediately. The 2 men took up the mattress and carried the sick child into the parlor. "I'll have to go down to my office to get some medicine, Kronberg. The drugstore won't be open. Keep the covers on her. I won't be gone long. Shake down the stove and put on a little coal, but not too much, so it'll catch quickly, I mean. Find an old sheet for me and put it there to warm." The doctor caught his coat and hurried out into the dark street. Nobody was stirring yet, and the cold was bitter. He was tired and hungry and in no mild humor. "The idea," he muttered, "to be such an ass at his age, about the 7th, and to feel no responsibility about the little girl. Silly old goat. The baby would have got into the world somehow, they always do. But a nice little girl like that, she's worth the whole litter. Where's she even got it from? Where she ever got it from?" He turned into the Duke block and ran up the stairs to his office. Thea Kronberg, meanwhile, was wondering why she happened to be in the parlor where nobody but company, usually visiting preachers, ever slept. She had moments of stupor when she did not see anything, and moments of excitement when she felt that something unusual and pleasant was about to happen, when she saw everything clearly in the red light from the icing glass sides of the hard coal burner. The nickel trimmings on the stove itself, the pictures on the wall, which she thought very beautiful, the flowers on the Brussels carpet, Czerny's daily studies, which stood open on the upright piano. She forgot, for the time being, all about the new baby. When she heard the front door open, it occurred to her that the pleasant thing which was going to happen was Dr. Archie himself. He came in and warmed his hands at the stove. As he turned to her, she threw herself wearily toward him, half out of her bed. She would have tumbled to the floor had he not caught her. He gave her some medicine and went to the kitchen for something he needed. She drowsed and lost the sense of his being there. When she opened her eyes again, he was kneeling before the stove, spreading something dark and sticky on a white cloth with a big spoon. Batter, perhaps. Ooh, okay. This is weird, but I guess he's a doctor. Presently, she felt him taking off her nightgown. He wrapped the hot plaster about her chest. There seemed to be straps which he pinned over her shoulders. Then he took out a thread and needle and began to sew her up in it. That, she felt, was too strange. She must be dreaming anyhow, so she succumbed to her drowsiness. Thea had been moaning with every breath since the doctor came back, but she did not know it. She did not realize that she was suffering pain. When she was conscious at all, she seemed to be separated from her body, to be perched on top of the piano or on the hanging lamp, watching the doctor sew her up. It was perplexing and unsatisfactory, like dreaming. She wished she could waken up and see what was going on. The doctor thanked God that he had persuaded Peter Kronberg to keep out of the way. He could do better by the child if he had her to himself. He had no children of his own. His marriage was a very unhappy one. As he lifted and undressed, oh boy, that's weird. Okay, this is really weird. As he lifted and undressed Thea, he thought to himself what a beautiful thing a little girl's body was. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. Like a flower. It was so neatly and delicately fashioned, so soft and so milky white. Thea must have got her hair and her silky skin from her mother. She was a little Swede through and through. What does that mean? Dr. Archie could not help thinking how he would cherish a little creature like this if she were his. Her hands, so little and hot, so clever too. He glanced at the open exercise book on the piano. When he had stitched up the flaxseed jacket, he wiped it neatly about the edges, where the paste had worked out on the skin. He put on her the clean nightgown he had warmed before the fire and tucked the blankets about her. As he pushed back the hair that had fuzzed down over her eyebrows, he felt her head thoughtfully with the tips of his fingers. No, he couldn't say that it was different from any other child's head, though he believed that there was something very different about her. He looked intently at her wide, flushed face, freckled nose, fierce little mouth, and her delicate, tender chin. The one, as if some fairy godmother had caressed her there and left a cryptic promise. Her brows were usually drawn together defiantly, but never when she was with Dr. Archie. Her affection for him was prettier than most of the things that went to make up the doctor's life in Moonstone. The windows grew gray. He heard a trampling on the attic floor, on the back stairs, then cries, "Give me my shirt! Where's my other stocking?" "I'll have to stay till they get off to school," he reflected, "or they'll be in here tormenting her, the whole lot of them." Okay. Well, the jury's out on Dr. Archie. He's either a very kind and caring man or should be jailed. But we'll have to see about that one tomorrow. The ice is thin. To quote Patricia, the ice is thin. So let's hope Dr. Archie's not the worst kind of man. Oh, excuse me. Squeeze me. All right. Let's finish up our quotes from How to Be an Anti-Racist today. This is like a quote about a parable about, or not a parable, a myth? A fable about, in the fable, a man and a lion travel together, arguing over who is superior. They pass a statue that shows a lion strangled by a man. The man says, "See there, how strong we are, and how we prevail over even the king of beasts." The lion replies, "This statue was made by one of you men. If we lions knew how to erect statues, you would see the man placed under the paw of the lion." Whoever creates the cultural standard usually puts themselves at the top of the hierarchy, which I thought was like a really cool quote, especially thinking about like Confederate monuments. Like, who's letting these stay there in the first place? Who's not taking these down, and who's letting them stay, as Ibram X. Kendi said, at the top of the cultural hierarchy? Okay. I am going to take off and go get a test, and I will see you all here tomorrow at 3. So have a wonderful rest of your day. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay hydrated, and stay active. Okie dokie. I will see you all later. Goodbye. Thanks for tuning in. Hopefully things work out better. Hopefully Dr. Archie is okay. All right. See y'all tomorrow. Goodbye.